Okay, hey everybody. So one of the issues that we're running into in class is the problem with switching from Ndynamics to regular dynamics. Ndynamics are nice for anything that has any sort of give to it, but if you're wanting something completely rigid, sometimes you can start struggling with making an Ndynamic object completely rigid and not interpenetrating. So one of the options for that would be to switch somewhere midstream from Ndynamics to regular dynamics. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and sort of look at how we can do that. First thing we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a polygon sphere, and this will be our Ndynamic object. So I'm going to move this up. Okay, and I'm going to bring up my outliner just so you can kind of see what's going on, because we're going to have to do a little bit of not really rigging but parenting to make this work. So this will be our end ball. So it's an Ndynamic ball. Okay, and at any point now we can just go ahead and turn that into an Ndcloth object. Go ahead and set this to 200. And you should be able to see now that that falls like an Ndynamic object. And of course you can make that any type of Ndynamic object. But let's say you have some the issue we're running into is dominoes falling, and they were Ndynamic dominoes, and they were needing to hit a ball at the end of this series of falls. So we decided to go ahead and make the ball a rigid object, but the problem with that is it wasn't really working very well. So we need to be able to create we need to be able to change from this nucleus object, this Ndcloth object, to Maya's traditional dynamics. So let's go ahead and create real quick a cube, and we will go ahead and set that as an active rigid body. Now if we had gravity on that, when I hit play it should fall, but as you'll see, Ndynamic objects and regular dynamic objects aren't interacting with each other. So how do and we'll make this we'll call this active dynamic cube. Okay, so these are our two objects, and of course these are our nucleus nodes. So what we need now is we need a passive object that's going to travel along with this Ndcloth object, and the passive object can strike this. So actually, let's go ahead and create, to do that, let's go ahead and create another cube, and polygon primitive cube. And this will end up being our passive object, but I want it to kind of fill up most of the volume of this sphere. Now this is a very imperfect way of doing it, and I'm sure there's probably cleaner ways of doing it, but this is sort of the fast, dirty way. This will be our passive cube. Okay, but I'm not going to set that as a passive object yet. And then just so you can see what's going to be controlling that, I will create a polygon sphere and move that up, scale that way down. Okay, and we'll put that in there. Okay, so what we're going to do now, this polygon sphere that's inside here, we're going to call the parent object. Okay, and the reason for that is because we want this parent object to drive this larger cube, and this cube is going to be our passive object. The problem with that is when Maya starts simulating with Ndynamics, if I stop here and select that sphere, you'll see that the object is actually still up here. This is acting more like a deformer, as if it's simulating on all of the sub-objects, all of the faces. So the actual origin of the object is still up there at that point. So if I just parented this box underneath it, the box would stay there because the origin of the object actually doesn't move. So what we have to do is we have to attach something to the mesh of this object. So when the mesh moves, the thing that we've attached to it will move with it. So I have the Ndcloth object selected. I'm going to grab this parent object, and you'll see why I'm calling it parent here in a bit. Under animation, constrain, I'm going to say geometry. That's going to snap, but now basically what's happening is that sphere is going to always stick to the geometry of the larger sphere. And if I hit back, it'll go back. But it's always sticking to that. So now what I can do is I can parent our larger cube underneath that parent sphere. Okay, I do this in the outliner by middle clicking on the object and dragging it onto parent. And now the this passive cube is a child of that parent sphere that is attached to the larger sphere. So all I have to do now is grab passive cube, and under regular dynamics we just go to create a passive rigid body, and when I hit play you'll see that they interact now. Now there is a slight issue with this, and that issue is that if this ball, this parent object, goes sliding around too much on this, the location of your cube can get lost. Like it could end up being too high or too low. So you kind of got to just play with that, and if it messes up, just delete it and restart, and it's not that much of a setup. But the problem now is if I hit render, I have a cube, and I don't want to render that cube. That cube is just there to bump into stuff. So we're going to make those things unrenderable now. The way you do that is just select the mesh. Under the attribute editor here, under the passive cube shape, so it's cube shape node, and that's actually where all of your render information is. Under object display, I'm just going to click visibility. I'm going to do the same thing with this little parent object. And now you'll see that when I hit render, neither of them are rendering. But when I hit play, they're still simulating. So it's kind of an illusion, and it's a little bit of a dirty illusion. It doesn't work the cleanest in the world. As you'll see, that's not a very clean contact that we got going on there. So to fix that, and this is why I keep the outliner open, if you want to fix that contact, then I can always grab this passive cube and just kind of nudge it up a little bit in the starting position. And now hopefully, that looks like it's hitting it a little bit better now. So if I go back and play, yeah. And so you can just kind of adjust that to see. And if at any point you want to turn the visibility back on just to see it, you can. But I'm just sort of raising the point of it, and when I hit play, so you see how it kind of slides out. That's the issue I'm talking about, is that once the stuff starts deforming, you'll get some weird things happening. So go back and hit play. So that feels pretty good though. So you just kind of have to eyeball it, and then at that point, that's when you would want to cache out this simulation. Now keep in mind, caching on one computer is not going to save it on another computer. If I cache out the animation for this and go to another computer, but I don't take all of my cache files with me, which that is all tied to being very strict with your project settings, then you're just going to have to recache it again. So you can lose work that way if you're not careful. But that's kind of it kind of comes with the territory of how this works. So remember to kind of keep your cache files with you, and you'll be able to find those. Let me see if I can find. Well, depending on where your Maya folders are located, you'll most likely find those under Documents, Maya, and this is 2012. Is that right? Projects, maybe. Yeah, default. And then that's going to show up under your, I believe it'll show up under data. but you may just have to dig around through until you find it. I don't think it's render data, but I believe it will show up under data after you cache that out. Well, let's find out. Let's cache out this simulation now. I've selected the box, and then I'll go to this is a rigid body. So I guess to cache out a rigid body, you do the bake on it. So that's fine. So it's the caching out of the encoth that you're not gonna be able to take with you. So encache, create new encache. And it's going to do this simulation all the way through. Okay, so after the cache is complete, you'll be able to see. Of course it's not there. Oh, because that's not the project I have it set to. I have it set to Greg's desktop, Maya miscellaneous. Okay. So if I go to Greg's desktop, blah, 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 you'll see that now I have a new cache folder. So that's actually for something different. So it is under data cache. I believe it's in here. It's 200 frames that was created just now. So yes, that's it. So all of these encoth shape 1 frames, those are your cache files. Those are stored under your Maya project folder of whatever project you have your file set to. So that should be everything. And then if you'll see that as you play this through, it works. Now, keep in mind that this is still simulating. So if you want to bake that out into frames, then that's fine. You just do the edit keys bake simulation. So that's how you do the rigid body bakes. Okay. So that should be able to give you a transfer into rigid body versus like standard rigid body versus encoth. And now encoth, the transition from that shouldn't be that hard, because once you've baked out all of this information on this object, then you can, it's just got keyframes on it. It's not a dynamic object anymore. And at that point you can add the passive Ndynamic object to it. So the enmesh, create passive collider. And at that point it can interact with any encoth object you want to. Okay, well that should cover it. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll talk to you soon.